Hello, Facebook world. Hello, studio audience. Make some noise. The camera can't see you. Woo! All right. So tonight we're talking about essential tools for musculoskeletal health and healing. And we're going to start with what I call the foundational pillars. Tonight is pillar number 1, which is water. But before we get into that, let's just talk a little bit about these musculoskeletal problems. This is a chart that was based on a very long-term Mayo Clinic study where they took the patient files of 144,000 patients and they looked at all the different diagnosed conditions that each one of those patients had. And then they lumped them into different categories based on the part of their body that was affected by that quote-unquote disease. Musculoskeletal problems came in at 57.5%. The next closest was skin disorders at 42.5%. So this tells you how widespread these problems are. These are things that affect your muscles, your joints, your ligaments, your tendons, your bursas, your nerves, your discs, everything within the musculoskeletal system. These issues typically cause pain, restricted lifestyles, reduced activity, and just depression and all kinds of mental, emotional type stuff. So this is a big problem. This is the biggest health problem in America statistically. So that's why we want to talk about it, because right now the stats are saying that it's just getting worse and worse. So whatever modern medicine's doing doesn't seem to be working. So we really need to get back to the basics and learn how to get our body to work right so that these things don't break down. Because these are not things that you catch, right? They're not things that are passed between people. These are developed problems that take time, to really break down and get as bad as they are. So if we can intervene at some point in that cycle, we can keep them from getting as bad and hopefully in many cases reverse them and get back to some degree of normalcy where you feel good and your lifestyle is back where you want it to be. So that sounds good to everybody, right? Yeah. Studio audience? Woo! All right, cool. So this is the chart that I just passed out. Anybody watching online, you can find this on my website. I believe there's an article on the www.nonfictionfitness.com/articles page. You can just scroll down a little bit. It says Natural Healing Secrets Revealed in one page, and that's where this is. But this is a compilation of all the different things that we can do to get our body healthier so that we can recover faster, have less pain, and be able to function better. And be able to age better. I mean, we're all in the same boat. We're all declining a little bit, as time goes on. And so we can actually do something to slow down that decline and to make our latter years a lot better than they would be otherwise. So these are all the things that I recommend to people on a regular basis. And we're only going to start with just one of these today, which is the foundational pillar, which I mentioned is water. But over the next several months, we're going to be going into each one of these topics and exploring how we can apply these things to our own life so we can get the benefits from it. So before we get into that, let me just kind of set us up with a little bit of an understanding. So musculoskeletal problems typically manifest as pain. Pain is linked to inflammation. We're all pretty familiar with that. That's why anti-inflammatories work to make us feel better, is because they help to reduce a little bit of this so that this is reduced. But what's behind the inflammation is tissue damage. This is damage to tissue that has happened because of some sort of physical stressor. That's like, the windows in your house that get blown out during high force winds. If they're rated to be 55 miles an hour and an 85 mile an hour wind comes through, it's going to break that window. Well, in your body, every single one of your tissues has its own little rating, if you will. It can handle this much of this before it breaks. Well, if you have too much of that thing onto one of your bodily tissues, then damage accrues just like that window breaks. You bend down to pick up a pencil, maybe you don't hurt anything, but you bend down to pick up a flower pot that's way heavier than you thought it was, and you pull something and you end up with inflammation and pain. So the tissue stress is really at the root of this. So every single one of the things on that chart addresses one or more of these components. We're either going to reduce tissue stress, let me get to this. We're either going to reduce tissue stress or increase the tissue strength. So the difference there is I'm either going to take my house that has 55-mile-an-hour rated windows to a zone where hurricanes never come through, right? I'm going to reduce the tissue stress, or I'm going to keep it where it is and replace them with 85-mile-an-hour rated windows, right? Which is increasing our tissue strength. So if we're strong enough to handle this tissue stress or this stress, then we're not going to have tissue damage as a result. So that's a really good thing to work towards. That's more in that physiological improvements category. Tissue repair and regeneration, you know, once your window's broken, somebody's got to come and fix it, right? Well, in your body, if you got something broken, your cells, your organ systems are working overtime to try to repair and regenerate that tissue so that it can become normal again. Inflammation, as a result of this happening, is reduced, and then pain is reduced. So each one of these things is connected. Now, unfortunately, most of the time people seek advice, and you know, we don't know any better, right? We seek advice from medical professionals that tend to focus a lot on these two. You know, they give us pills that block the pain signal from getting to our brain. They give us shots that reduce the inflammation. They might even do some sort of surgery to try to reduce some tissue stress in the hopes that that will make all these other things happen. But oftentimes the root issues are not really dealt with properly, so this cycle just keeps on perpetuating. And that's what a lot of people are dealing with nowadays, especially people, you know, kind of middle-aged and older. So this is a good visual for what tissue repair and regeneration is like. So this is a skin wound, and these are the different stages of healing that a skin wound will go through. You know, so when you have a physical stress, so I fall down and I scrape my knee, right? That's a physical stress on my skin. That's enough of a stress to actually damage my skin, and I get a wound. Well, my body's going to start working really quickly to try to repair that wound, and it's going to take it through all these different stages until it gets back to basically normal again. And most of the time, you won't even have any remnants of it afterwards unless it was super deep, and then you're left with a scar. And this is what happens on the inside of our body too. If we tear something, or we strain something, or we sprain something, or we have some other type of tissue stress on some of our musculoskeletal cells, our body will go through this same process. The problem is that sometimes we have things working against us, and we're like constantly scraping our knee again, so to speak, and we just keep on re-injuring and going through that same cycle. So that's why all four of those components are really important to be addressing, so that we don't re-injure ourselves, and we help to accelerate this process as much as possible, and in the meanwhile reduce the pain enough to be able to do life while we're still healing. So inside the body, like I said, there are examples of that same exact effect. This is one that we're all very familiar with, right? Who knows about arthritis, right? Most people, you know, over the age of 50 probably think they have arthritis, even if they don't. So it's probably worth exploring what exactly it is, and you know, kind of what the nature of it is in terms of its recoverability. So this area here, this is the wound, so to speak. This is where the ends of the bone. Let me grab my bone here. This is where the end of the bone has been rubbed down, and the cartilage, the padding that's on the end of the bone, has been basically worn off, and it's inflamed, as indicated by the red discoloration. Now, what's interesting about this is that you see that not all of it's worn down. I mean, this is pretty healthy. This is decent. You know, over here it's not so bad. And even as it gets further out from this area, you know, it seems to be a little bit healthier, right? So it kind of looks like that skin wound a little bit, doesn't it? Well, this very likely could repair itself like the skin wound can. Most doctors won't tell you that, but it can if you do enough of the right things for long enough. But this is what that looks like, just so you get a visual of, you know, how this is similar to the stuff that we're more familiar with. So how can we get started? Well, water is going to be our very first priority when it comes to recovering and getting everything to heal faster. I was going to talk about total daily moving time, but I added that in last time when I sort of did a pre-run of this, and it just made it kind of go a little bit longer than I wanted. So we're going to really just stick with water today. So why does water matter? Well, it's because most of your body is water. Bone is about 25% water. Joint cartilage, this stuff that pads the ends of the bones, is up to 85% water. ligaments 70%, tendons 75%, menisci, which are the meniscuses, which people tear oftentimes in their knees and stuff, that's up to 78% water. This part that's on the outside of our disc, that makes up the wall of our disc and kind of encapsulates all the fluid that cushions our spine. That's about 80% water. And the nucleus, the inside, the little gel part that's cushiony, is up to 90% water. So these tissues rely on water to maintain their shape, their size, their integrity, because just like how you'd see a wet sponge behave differently than a dry sponge, so do these tissues behave differently when they're wet versus dry. Now, when your body is deficient in water, what it does is it does this thing called rationing, which basically shuttles water away from the non-essential organs and it puts it into the essential organs. These are your starting five: your brain, heart, lungs, liver, and kidneys. These are the ones that keep us alive. So these are the ones that get every little bit of water when we're in a dehydrated state. Now that leads to survival, but it doesn't really lead to thriving and full expression of our body's capabilities. Because even though these things are still functioning, A, they're not functioning great, and B, the other stuff that doesn't have the water, because this is getting priority, is not functioning so well. So it's really not a good thing. Now, this is kind of like a little image of like what's going on in the body when we're dehydrated. Due to severe drought conditions, irrigation in the park areas has been temporarily suspended. Whenever we're in a situation where we just don't have enough water, we've got to prioritize it, because without water we die. In fact, we only live about 3 to 5 days without water if we were to be completely dehydrated. So that's a big deal. So this is the thing that it breaks it down inside your stomach, and then it transforms into these molecules of energy eventually, called ATP. Well, the ATP is kind of like gasoline in an engine, in that nothing happens until there's a spark on it. That you have to have a spark created in order to have that potential energy be used for actual energy. And that's the same thing that happens with ATP. Although you don't have to have a spark, you have to have water, because you go through this process called hydrolysis. If I have a molecule of potential energy here that could fuel my brain, that could fuel my heart, that could fuel my liver, my kidneys, my muscles, and make me able to do life, it doesn't do a thing until water hits it. And that's what breaks off one of these molecules that then leads to energy being produced. So literally, if you've ever felt tired, okay, there's a very good chance that your body's not able to break off that ATP molecule and produce the energy that would actually give you that get up and go type feeling. And a lot of times we think, oh, well, I just need to eat something. Well, that's probably not the case, because we usually have plenty of potential energy there. So we don't really need more of this ATP. What we need to do is we need to be able to break it down. So we need that water to come and hit it so that it acts like a spark on our fuel tank to power our car for wherever we want to go. So this is why we die without water. And certain tissues can last longer without water. Our brain, it needs water constantly to be able to function at a high level. Our nerves have to be able to communicate electrical energy even in the presence of water. So this is a huge, huge important topic to be talking about. And how can water reduce tissue stress? So what we were looking at just now kind of more fit into this tissue regeneration type category. So whenever your body wants to build new tissue, so let's just say that you've got arthritis on the end of this bone, and your body needs to go and do something like it would do if you had a skin wound. It needs to build new skin. Well, if it needs to build new cells where those damaged cells are now, it's got to use energy to make it happen. And it's got to use water to actually build the cell, right? Because we just looked at how cells are like 70, 80, 90% water, right? So if it's going to build new cells, it's going to need water along with some protein to go in and build that thing. So water in abundance in the body allows for tissue regeneration to occur more rapidly. But how can it reduce tissue stress? So if we want to have like the actual stress on our tissues reduced, could we get that effect from water? Well, yes, because we have this great thing called synovial fluid. Synovial fluid is something that basically can kind of be looked at as joint grease. You know, you ever heard somebody make the joke like, oh, I wish WD-40 worked on knees or, you know, on shoulders, right? Well, you do have WD-40, so to speak, inside your body, and it's called synovial fluid. Now, synovial fluid basically makes up this capsule that's around the joint, and it creates space between the two bones. And what this does is it allows for there to be cushioning. It's kind of like if you were to jump onto a waterbed. You know, you'd be cushioned. You wouldn't hit the floor, right? Because the water would give a little bit and would kind of conform to you, and it would absorb the weight of your body and sort of distribute it amongst the water, right? Well, this kind of acts the same way. Whenever you take a step, like let's just take the knee, for example, whenever you take a step, you know, that pounding of your body weight onto the ground, you know, it creates a shock, it creates a force, a stress up through that joint, and this creates a cushion. So imagine, you know, that worn down piece of cartilage right here that we just saw in that other picture being separated from the other bone by a thick layer of fluid. You might not ever even feel that because it's not actually rubbing on anything. You know, you start to feel it whenever your bones rub together. You know, you ever heard of bone on bone, right? Well, bone on bone basically says like, okay, well, this bone is pushing on this bone, and it's like creating all this pressure, you know, and the synovial fluid helps to create that space and that cushion so that that's not happening. Now, what else is really cool about it, you know, if you take your hands like this and you try to push them together and then you try to separate them, you know, you'll notice that the harder you push down, the harder it is to separate them, right? Because of this thing called friction. You know, it's the same reason why if I push my foot down on the carpet and I try to move it forward, I can't. But if this was like ice, right, I'm going flying, right? Because there's no friction on ice, it's slick. Well, this creates a more slick surface for our bones to glide on, right? And they can glide easier. It's kind of like if you were to do this, but rub your whole hand in oil, you know, it would just slide, right? So that reduces friction, so you're not rubbing the joint as much. So you have both this cushioning effect and this anti-friction effect that makes your joints able to move more comfortably, which is a reduction of tissue stress, which helps to accelerate healing, which helps to reduce inflammation, which helps to reduce pain, right? You guys seeing how water can be our best friend, our joint's best friend? Studio audience? Woo! Water! All right. So how do we keep hydrated? Well, this is one of my secrets right here. Take a bottle with you everywhere you go. I personally prefer glass bottles because plastic can leach like petroleum chemicals into your water, especially if they get stored in a hot environment. So glass, you know, doesn't allow for that because there's nothing that's really going to get into the water from the glass unless it's like bacteria. So you just keep it washed and you should be pretty good. You drink ½ ounce of water per pound of body weight per day. So, you know, like me, I weigh 170. I want to drink about 85 ounces of water a day. Sounds like a lot, but it's because our standard is like way down here, you know, because of what we were used to. And unfortunately, you know, most of us just grew up in homes and in environments where this just wasn't really pushed as an important thing. You know, maybe you drink water with like pills that you take or maybe with a meal, but, you know, usually we tend to favor other beverages. You know, sodas, teas, coffee, different things like that, which can add to your total water quotient of the day, but most of those things are kind of dehydrating too. Like if it has sugar, artificial sweeteners, caffeine, or alcohol, it can actually pull water out of your body. So you really need to get pure water over all those other things. That's good stuff. Also bring and drink extra water if you've been sweating. You know, we lose water many different ways. The main way is through breathing. But if you sweat, you lose a lot more. So you really want to compensate for that by drinking extra water if you've been sweating. One great rule of thumb is just to begin the day with 16 ounces. You know, just wake up, get a big glass, and I mean, I like to chug water. I can just pound it in, you know, just in 10 seconds. But you know, take whatever time you need, but try to get that early in the morning, because that's when you're most dehydrated, because you've been, you know, 7, 8, 9 hours, whatever, without any water, and you know, you want to replenish it as quickly as you can, and that'll help give you that get up and go in the morning too, because studies show that many people will feel the heightened energy effects of water within even 2 to 3 minutes, because your body absorbs it that quickly. And if something's starving for water, and it's like, we want to produce this energy, but you're not giving us what we need, and then all of a sudden it gets it, then it's like, oh, okay, now we can go to work, you know. And like I said, avoid the dehydrating beverages. And consistency is really the key. I mean, you know, there's only so much you're really going to notice in one day or 1 week or even 1 month. What you really want to be working towards is consistency. Because tissue repair, tissue regeneration, all this stuff, it takes time. I mean, it really takes time. It takes time for it to break down. You know, it may take months, years, decades even for certain things to break down. And that shouldn't discourage you, you know, by thinking, oh, it's too late. Well, no, you know, every single day is a day your body needs to produce energy in order to do what you want it to do. So you want to give it everything it needs for that day to be able to do it that day. And also keep in mind the long-term benefits of, you know, when you do this consistently, you're going to heal faster. So what time we got? Oh, I'm doing pretty good on time. You guys doing good? Studio audience? Woo! Facebook world. I can't hear you, but I'm sure you're doing great. So the second thing that I want to talk about, okay, so water is definitely number one, okay? Next to oxygen, you know, that's the most important thing that we could possibly put in our body. I call it the world's most powerful medicine. And there's even some doctors that I follow that are more naturopathic, even though they're MDs. And one guy in particular, he says that about 80% of his patients get significantly better, no matter what their health problem is, just by drinking the recommended amount of water for, you know, several weeks, and then staying on it consistently. But here's the next thing that I want to talk about. It's locomotion. You know, it's not like that song, you know, come on baby, do the locomotion. But what this is more referring to is like moving our body, like going from one place to another, you know, because what we're going to talk about later on is joint-specific motion, which is one of the components on that chart. But this is locomotion. This is where we're actually going to move our entire body. So this would be kind of more in the line of like walking. But here's the effects of locomotion. So you get improved blood flow. You know, whenever you start to move, your body has to pump more blood because your muscles have a demand. They have to produce more energy to get you to go, and your blood is what carries that energy to the muscle. So you get more blood flow. Blood is what also will help to regenerate tissue. So the more blood you have circulating throughout your body, the more nutrients are going into cells and the more waste is being taken out. So that's a really, really good thing. Also, it'll improve your oxygen flow. You know, it'll make your body have to take in more oxygen, which will feed your cells even more and accelerate the healing even faster. It also stimulates the release of synovial fluid. You know, when you have motion in any joint, you know, when those bones rub against each other, that will actually signal your body to start producing that synovial fluid, because it knows that it needs to start lubricating those joints in order to make your movements easier. So as soon as you start moving, that's when you start to have that come out. And that's why a lot of times people will say like, oh, when I get out of bed, I'm really stiff, but as I move around, I feel a lot better. Totally normal occurrence. Part of that may be dehydration, but also part of that is this need to release synovial fluid through movement. So yeah, that is a normal thing, and just keep doing it, and it gets better as you keep moving typically. It also reduces your body stiffness. You know, whenever we're still and in one position for a while, our body tends to get pretty stiff. You know, things get more locked up because nothing's moving, nothing's stretching. Our muscles aren't having to lengthen, and you know, everything just starts to stiffen up. So that'll help reduce that. And like I said too, it'll push the waste out of the cells. So this is a visual of what happens inside your body when you're not moving enough, right? Stagnant water, creating pond scum, right? So you have this entire network of trash collectors all throughout your body. It's called your lymphatics, and they're basically like little vacuums sucking all the junk out of your cell to excrete it, you know, through, you know, going to the bathroom and stuff. And if you're not moving, this stuff is just piling up in different places. You know, it's just piling up, and that's one of the reasons why you get fatigued. That's one of the reasons why you might get sick more often than you think you should. It's also one of the reasons why tissues don't heal fast enough, because if you don't get the waste out of there, I mean, can you imagine what fish might be able to live in this kind of water, right? Versus like a nice, you know, stream with running water that's hell. I mean, look at the vibrant life that's going on all around this, right? And you're not going to see pond scum in moving water, right? And so same in your body, you know, you start getting that stuff out and you create an environment where things can thrive. And that's what's necessary for tissues to repair itself and to regenerate. So these are just some of the common, what I call motion thieves. We live in a day and age where it's not boring to sit still. You know, let's be honest, right? Like I could think of 20 things to do sitting still that I could do for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours maybe and not get bored, right? You know, binge watch a Netflix thing or a ball game on TV or tennis or the news. I mean, you know, how often have you been at home and you've been watching the news and before you know it, it's like time to go to bed. And you're like, wow, I felt like I just sat down, you know? But your body, you know, it has a lot of negative effects start to creep up in it from not moving too much. And so we want to be mindful of how much time and more importantly, how much stillness we're giving to these different things. TV, movies, cell phones, computers, when we go to restaurants, you know, even jobs and hobbies. You know, a lot of it takes place in a sitting position or just in a still position. So we want to try to just keep moving as much as we can and not let these motion thieves have their way with us. So here's some good rules of thumb. Try to get more moving time than non-moving time during your waking hours. You know, so if you cut the sleep time out of the equation and you look at those, you know, 15, 16, whatever hours you have left during the day, try to be moving more than you're staying still. That's a really good rule of thumb. So, you know, one of the ways that you can help yourself accomplish that is to get an activity tracker. You know, Fitbits, pedometers, those things work fantastic. You know, set yourself a daily step goal, 10,000, 12,000, 15,000. You know, I always laugh at my mom. I go over to her house and she's walking in and out of the garage, you know, into the kitchen. And I'm like, what are you doing, Mom? She's like, I got to get my steps for the day. I'm not at 10,000, you know. It's amazing how this type of stuff keeps you motivated because you can see where you're at any point during the day. And then also, anytime that you're sitting, for whatever reason, get up for 5 minutes every hour. Studies have shown that one of the really negative effects of sitting is the decreased blood flow, you know, because we're putting so much pressure through our lower body and it's actually impeding the blood from getting back to the heart. And when the blood can't get back to the heart, it can't go back to the rest of the body. So it really disrupts circulation. That's why sometimes if you sit for too long, like your legs will fall asleep, you know. But long before that happens, the blood flow is still somewhat stunted. And so in order to offset even just that part of it, you know, getting up for 5 minutes every hour, you know, can actually make that happen. But you also, even if you do that, you still have all those other effects, you know, waste not getting out of the cell and, you know, stress on the tissue. I mean, if you put this thing, you know, under that kind of pressure, you got pressure coming up here and then you got gravity pulling down. I mean, you're basically just compressing this thing like an accordion, and, you know, it's no wonder that after a little while, you start to ache a little bit after you've been sitting for a long time. Because we really weren't made to do that. That's more of a current modern phenomenon, you know, since technology has given us a lot of interesting reasons to sit still. And then drink more water. You know, some people say, well, I'm going to go to the bathroom too much. Well, that just means you're going to move more, right? So it's actually helping to accomplish number 2 as well as number 1. And then find a few things you enjoy that require movement, you know, whether that's gardening, housework, you know, volunteer work, whatever the case may be, just anything to get you up and moving around so that you can get more moving time than non-moving time. And then, so here's just some action steps to go home with. So first thing, if you don't have one, buy a water filtration system. That's going to really be a helpful thing because tap water is not really the best water. So even something like a Brita filter or one of those, you know, other, you know, commercial filters that you might find at Walmart, Target, or Home Goods, a place like that, can work wonders. So get yourself a water filtration system, get a carry-along bottle, and then I also recommend if you have a smartphone, you know, set alarms in there, you know, to go off every hour or something, you know, that just says drink water, just to give you a reminder, because it takes about 21 days to build a new habit. So you want to give yourself a little bit of grace, and you want to give yourself as many things as you can to keep you on track, especially during those 21 days, because it's so easy to just forget and just fall into the familiar. So that's a really helpful way to offset that. And then buy an activity tracker, like I mentioned, and then, like I said, find 3 activities or hobbies that you can do while you're moving. So that'll really get you a good leap forward in this whole healing and recovery process, and it'll really help for you to offset any other future health issues, musculoskeletal or otherwise. So, cool. So, studio audience, was that good? You like it? All right, Facebook world, thank you for joining us. All right, I'm going to